I sometimes just even open up with have you ever heard of pelvic floor dysfunction, or like that people can have issues, or what do you understand by that? Because I want to actually know, do they have a good basic understanding of it? Have they actually done a Dr. Google and they've got all this misinformation and so they've gone down that rabbit hole, so that then I know what I'm dealing with in terms of kind of trying to steer against misinformation. And it's really hard. Sometimes patients come in and, we all do it. I Google stuff myself. Do you know what I mean? Like Google is
Yeah.
a go-to for things. And but it's the way and how we expect patients to know what's good and what's bad when they're getting stuff. And it's that we talked about landmines when you go up and you're trying to not get to kids following you down. But when people are coming and they're looking for health information, they're just getting hit with all this stuff that's miscommunication. But to make it less threatening and to make them feel like they can talk about stuff, I guess as a pelvic health clinician, I have lots of like diagrams and things about the room too, so they can see that this is definitely something that people have come here before about, if you know what I mean. Like, this is my usual daily practice. It's not something that I treat every now and then. So I try to kind of make it less threatening that way.
Well done. You have finally discovered the most important health podcast you will ever need as a medical professional. The conversations you are about to hear are guaranteed to change your clinical practice and hopefully transform you into a better conversationalist. They could even make you better crack at parties. Welcome to Teacup, where swearing is guaranteed.
So we've got north west of Ireland, Shaw on Shaw, as you say. How's things going? You all right?
Not too bad, thanks. Yeah, getting myself together there after rooting the house with the laptop.
But tranquilizing 4 children and then ripping laptops out of your hoop.
Actually managed to get away and not have people follow me, and then you have to go back in to look for something.
It's like proximity mines are lined around the room, like
completely.
He's looking at you going, what are you doing back? What are you doing back?
You're finished already? Yeah. I'm like, no.
Yeah. Nah. Did not even started yet. Brilliant. Well, actually, starting on the for those who don't understand Irish, that's northwest of Ireland in the house. And Gráinne, that means love, doesn't it?
It does,
Gró.
yeah.
And Gráinne, I believe, which is short for Gráinne, is son. Isn't that right? Son,
or there's definitely some association with Gráinne as well. There's some sort of Irish association with Gráinne, but it's the Irish for grace.
Just all the best things in it.
Yeah, so I'm just ticking them all.
Sunlight. Yeah, it's like a greedy name. Maybe put greed in there as well, And you're my third Irish person on, and my third female.
Oh, nice. That's a good ratio.
Yeah, so you got 3 names. You're the third person, and you're the third female.
I like that. Good.
Yes, good. And just so people get to know you really quickly, I'm going to ask you 10 quick fire questions.
Ooh, okay.
You have to go one or the other. There's no kind of you know yourself. So, coach or therapist?
Therapist. Oh, therapist.
Night in or night out?
Night in.
Yeah, well, you got 4 kids in you, so it's just like school or university.
Love school.
Oh man, what school did you go to?
Mount Lourdes in Enniskillen.
Enniskillen.
Yeah,
you are spitting distance from Sligo, really.
I know.
Communication or exercise?
Communication first and foremost.
I came up with these a while ago, and I'm like, oh no, why have I written this? But this is people understand. Do you call it a vulva or a vagina?
Oh, so you have to know there's not. I'm not choosing one of those. That was a trick question.
It was a trick question. It was a trick question, but I put it in there because I was like, how do I ask one or the other? And it's like, you can't say vulva or vagina. It's even way worse.
That's awful. Imagine I had answered that. Imagine you had got me in my quickfire flow and tricked me, and I was like, vulva. my career would be over.
Imagine that. All the vagina people would be like, oh my God, what, and before people have just tuned into this and they're going, what are these pair on? We'll tell you what you do later. Swearing or not swearing?
I think there is something therapeutic about swearing. I don't mind a wee swear.
Soccer or rugby?
Soccer.
Who do you support?
Liverpool. We're a Liverpool house. I don't really support, but I support my daughter's team more so.
Where's the stop recording button?
I didn't realize how controversial that was until I've had the kids come up, and now Liverpool's very controversial.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, yeah. Dancing or chatting on a night out?
I'm a chatter. I love chat. I love pubs. I don't like nightclubs. I love pubs because you can have a chat.
Alcohol or soft drink?
I do like a wee wine.
Everything's a wee.
I do like a wee wine.
We chat, we wine. And then last one, research or rapport?
Oh, you caught me on that one. I'm going to say research because I'm in the thick of my research era at the minute.
Fair play. No, nice. So everyone knows exactly who you are now from those questions. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that we know you. I wanted to say as well, when I was getting you on, when I was working in London, the best physios, the best crack I got out of physios were always pelvic health, or at the time we used to call them women's health.
Yeah.
Well, it was especially in London anyway. There was a group of us, and I'd always hang out with them because it was like it's proper X-rated, and it was good crack, and they didn't mess about. It was always the way. So I'll definitely tip the cap off to the pelvic health heads. I knew whenever I worked there, if they're listening here. And then the last thing before we're going into that is, what is your favorite genre of music? And then yeah, go on, yeah. And then tell me, if you were to use a song or music to describe yourself or who you are as a person, what would you do?
That is such a hard question, and I actually need to go back and listen to all your podcasts to see what sort of answers people give, because
you haven't listened to them all already?
I haven't listened to them all already because the 4 kids got in the way. Is that all right? But what I find is I am the person who likes it. Every song's my favorite song, but then the next one's my favorite song too, and I genuinely mean it, because when a song comes on, I'm like, I love this song, and there's no genre in particular. I like everything from Mary Black, I'm Irish, to Motown, to a bit of Eminem to pump you up, to Ed Sheeran. I like it all, so I do. I don't know what song would describe me, but actually at the last conference I presented at, all the speakers were picked an entrance song, like where you had to walk up, and it was
that's mint.
It was really good for getting the crowd fired. But mine was more probably around because I was the first speaker, but it was Pink, Get This Party Started, so I quite like that. So I'll just knuckle in with that.
I suppose an observation I'd make then on what you were saying about you've got 4 kids, you reached the top of your career in the NHS and then went, right, I'm going to start a private practice, and now you're in the midst of research, and every time I tune into what you're at, it's like, so it sounds like you're like, yeah, this is a great song, I'm going to do this, yeah, this is the next thing. So it's like, that's kind of your style, isn't it? It's like just bang, 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 let's go for it, like, you know.
Yeah,
so,
and it's like, I like variety. I actually am happiest when there is variety. Do you know what I mean? Like any one thing for too long, I'm better having loads of different things.
Yeah, cool. All right, nice one. One thing before we get, how I want to open it with you as well is I have when I teach, I had a slide, and it's Batman and the Keith Leather. Is it Keith? Yeah, no, the Joker, the new one. Yeah. It wasn't a Keith. What's the name? I can't remember anyway. It's Batman and Joker, right?
Yeah,
and they're in
Phoenix?
like a
No,
I can't remember anyway. It's Batman and Joker.
Okay. And
they're in a police station. And I'm looking at the slide here because I can't. And what I've done, the bubble is basically a physio-patient relationship, and I've written this is why I was trying to say to when we're talking to therapists, like, we have a super difficult job, and it's like patients come in, we're complete strangers, right? And it's like, if Batman says, "Hi, please tell me lots of personal information in the next 3 minutes, and don't bore me," and the Joker's response is, "Well, funny story, erections have been a bit of an issue recently." And the reason I put that in there is, like, no one's going to tell you about erections in the first couple of minutes when you meet a stranger, or anything around mental health or sexual health. Certainly those two are definitely going to be hot topics for people not wanting to say anything, never mind anything else. So that's how I open up, how much of a difficult job we have. So from the question to you is then, like, how are we going to make asking about pelvic health, or how do you address the communication with your patients around that, or the difficulty with asking questions in that area?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because it often is one of the barriers to either people seeking help, or when they do try to access help, it's the barrier to them that being received or picked up on and actioned, because it can be embarrassing and taboo both ends, if you know what I mean, for the therapist or for the patient. I actually, in the last few years, implemented like a pre-screening questionnaire that I send out, because it was a time-saving thing as well, so that, like, you know, a lot of the like subjective questions that I'm asking, I get sent out to the patients beforehand, and the majority of people do fill it in. And it's great because actually you're already getting, some people give you minimal information because they want to get in and, you know, break down and find out they feel comfortable. Other people do give you all the information straight away, basically in that form. But I find it useful because it might feel a little bit less threatened for them. They can start to communicate some of the things they want to say to me. And once they come in through the door, some of my like icebreaker questions are usually to do with, I've been reading your form there, thanks for filling that in. And you know, it's interesting, some people are really funny filling in forms, really witty, like they fill in things and there's quite funny comments. And so I'll pick up on a few things they got there, or I'll be like, I see you work as this, and you know, you'll break them into it. But then I'll get to what they've put in their form for the reason they're coming to me today. And it just seems to ease them in. It's worked really well actually from that communication standpoint, and yet that wasn't why I implemented it, but I found it to be a really useful tool.
Yeah.
Mm.
Go on. Yeah. No,
I
go
was
on.
going to say, and then when I'm opening up, basically I do put as generic as that. Sometimes I just go, so tell me a little bit about why you're here today, to see where they go to first and to let them decide how they're entering that conversation, because usually I do have an idea why they're here. They maybe communicate a bit forward and back before they've booked in, but it can be quite triggering or quite off-putting for some, you know what I mean? It is a really intimidating thing for someone to come either about incontinence or sexual dysfunction or any of the issues that I would treat in the day-to-day to clinic. So it's just letting them know. Or if they say something, and to actually thinking of some of the wider clinicians or therapists or fitness professionals who might be listening, if pelvic health isn't your bread or butter, and you know, you do find these questions quite intimidating or awkward for you to ask, I always think opening it up with that patient from the point of view of, did you know that incontinence is really common? Do you ever find that? And when you let them know that it's a really common issue and you've prefaced it with that, it's less intimidating for them to admit that they have it, rather than a, do you ever leak? Just putting it out there. They don't know if they should be leaking, shouldn't be leaking, if they're the first person in the world who's ever leaked. You know, they don't know the context of the question. So I always open it with, do you know that it's really common across all ages that women often find that they leak during sports or do this? And it takes the threat away from the question.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that's what I was going to say. Like, what I'm really interested as well over these conversations to unravel is when you said, so that's great. So it's kind of interesting. Organically, the questionnaires made it a communication tool in some ways. And you kind of said, I want to pick up on a few things. You said, like, some put more information, which is great, gives you loads of, and then some put less information. What does that make you think something about? Does that, over your experience in seeing patients, does that develop a pattern in what you know, the types of people or even subgroups? Do you think you see things like that?
Yeah, especially if they filled it in when I sent it, and so I know they've had time to before the press end. If they've just put minimal information in, but I know their appointment's in 5 minutes time, I know that they didn't remember to fill in the form, and so they're just racing through it. But if they filled it in and sent it, I sometimes I'm already expecting that this might be a particularly difficult, you know, they're feeling that this is a very vulnerable situation they're coming from. They're not feeling completely confident or comfortable talking about it. And so I'll have that on my radar, and I'll be very mindful about how I do communicate, or that. And usually it actually, like I mentioned about saying, you know, that urinary incontinence is really common, but I'll also, like for a lot of the ones I get, particularly younger women with sexual dysfunction, so either pain with intercourse, inability to have intercourse, any sort of issues like this, they're even less talked about than someone who maybe has a little bit of leak when they cough or sneeze. So literally people come in thinking they are the only person to have these symptoms. So it's really isolating for them. So I often try to go, do you know what, I see a lot of this, and get communication language. So all they've like, you've seen something like this before, you've heard of these symptoms. I'm like, oh yeah. I was like, I only treat pelvic health. Like that's my career. You know, that's how many people have these issues. And you can see them delayer in front of you. And then suddenly that's all, then you open them up and all they want to do is talk because they've had no one to mention these symptoms to who would understand, and suddenly then you just get it all. And for people, sometimes a lot of the session is just talking in the first time because there's so much information and you want to make that person feel valued and heard. And so I think that's really, really important. I think sometimes healthcare can be too on a, rolling timer belt, and that you feel like people are getting rushed in and rushed out, and the people have to get through their performer of what they want to ask and what they want to tell. And I sometimes like to put it in the patient's control, that they're going to control nearly what's happening during this session.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with that. And we could go off, and I'm absolutely trying to stop myself tangent off there because I'm like going, oh my God, I want to talk about that for 20 minutes. But we might come back to it because what I'd really like, because yes, I totally agree with that. And I set up my clinic and did 90 minutes for new patients for that reason, to be able to relax and not have to think I need to get through this really quickly. I can build relationships. But as I said to you, I don't want to go off on a tangent on that way. What I'd like to ask you there though is, you said icebreaker questions, and I know these can be difficult and organic when you meet somebody, and you also nearly like gateway questions. So you've kind of introduced it with regards to, you get some pre-information, you kind of maybe say it's, you kind of normalize it, I guess. Is there other things that you look out for or do even in your environment, or to create a more open? Because I want to steal stuff from you, because you obviously talk about really personal stuff that a lot of people would find personal. Sexual health is as personal as you can get, like you just said. So I think we can learn an awful lot from therapists who deal with that level of communication, and I want to steal kind of how you do that a little bit. So is there questions that you might do, or is there approaches, maybe not questions, approaches that you would do as well, or anything else on that?
I sometimes just even open up with, have you ever heard of pelvic floor dysfunction, or like that people can have issues, or what do you understand by that? Because I want to actually know, do they have a good basic understanding of it? Have they actually done a Dr. Google and they've got all this misinformation, and so they've gone down that rabbit hole, so that then I know what I'm dealing with in terms of kind of trying to steer against misinformation. And it's really hard. Sometimes patients come in and, we all do it. I Google stuff myself. Do you know what I mean? Like Google is a go-to for things. But it's the way and how we expect patients to know what's good and what's bad when they're getting stuff. And it's just, it's that we talked about landmines when you go up and you're trying to not get to kids following you down. But when people are coming and they're looking for health information, they're just getting hit with all this stuff that's miscommunication. But to make it less threatening and to make them feel like they can talk about stuff, I guess as a pelvic health clinician, I have lots of like diagrams and things about the room too, so they can see that this is definitely something that people have come here before about, if you know what I mean. Like, this is my usual daily practice. It's not something that I treat every now and then. So I try to kind of make it less threatening that way. And I'm trying to think anything else. In terms of, if I find that people aren't ready for us to delve into the pelvic health questions yet, in their health screening things too, I'll look for their interests and hobbies, and I'll put a bit of chat in about that and tell me a little bit about that. And if you've been doing that long, or usually it's interesting careers. I'm really always interested in what people do for a living. So I usually go, what does that involve? Because it might be something I've not heard of. So you can really ease people in. And I think if someone feels that they're here and they're being listened to and they're being seen as a person, they're already less threatened. And I find that helps. I find seeing the person in front of you and, really seeing and listening to them is really important.
It's interesting you say that. Exactly. You said, and the other guests like Ben Cormack has said as well, and a few others, about like, he's interested in the topic of communication. So he gets excited about meeting people and understanding people or whatever. And like we said, there's like, I'm a right nosy git, like, as well. I am interested in, like, I would say to therapists as well. I'm like going, it's like, I call it the Irish principle, or there's a book written by Robert Cialdini. He's written a book called Influence. And one of the principles of influence is similarity principle, which is where if you're similar to somebody, you're likely to develop more of a connection. So if you've got similar hobbies, similar interests, etc. So I always refer to, like, if Irish people meet each other outside of Ireland, it's like isn't it? It's like like I always say, it's maybe it happens in other countries, but it's like honey to it. Like you meet somebody at a festival in another country and you're like, oh my God, we're best friends within 2 minutes. And then you know everyone, then you know all their friends. And then you've drank in the same pub as them or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like bang, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. And I've actually often wondered that, because part of my interest as well, and I always see all my interests are kind of colliding in nearly together, and I've managed to somehow make a job role that didn't exist as a job role in a sense, but I'm kind of trying to do the different things I like. And I've always enjoyed what I call people watching. Like, even say I went on holidays or something, you're in a bustling city, I love just sitting, having a cup of coffee or something and watching the world go by and how people interact or what's going on. And in my research, I'm starting to implement a component to it to do a feminist phenomenological approach. So I'm doing a bit of qualitative research, but taking a very different type. I want to get that lived experience of the person and their voice coming through in the research, rather than all about what I think, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
So I do
And
think.
yeah, that that's my favorite type of stuff to listen to or read, even, as opposed to the really kind of hardcore data-based research, which is great and it gives us some information, obviously, and I'm not knocking that either. I'm also not saying that other countries, if anyone's listening going, it's only Irish people. I'm just saying I can only experience it, but it is the same. It is something. And so, and the reason I brought that up as well, we'll come back to your research as well, because I'm really interested in that. But it's like when I meet people, like patients as well, like obviously there's certain information I need to get about their injury, but I'm also, and I don't know what you think, and if maybe you've some input as well, is like if they say like I've got 3 kids or 4 kids, like I was desperate to find out the names or what gender your kids are, you know what I mean, just as a pure kind of like, oh, that'd be interesting, because it's often a gateway again into just that similarity principle again. You're, oh yeah, I've got kids, or that's a nice name, and oh, that name's what we nearly went for that, something daft like that, football teams, you name it, just to be able to open up separate chat that you would normally do if you met somebody, just to break into more personal conversation. What is that something that you kind of apply as well? Or
Absolutely. And that's something, and I think that just, it's only when you're saying it, I'm like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. That's nearly something that's so passively done in the way we exist. But it is so interesting, because it's like you say, that you can see people delayer even when they're like, when they see that you've an interest in hearing about their kids, because that brings them, you can see what brings joy to people, if you know what I mean. And that's a non-threatening subject for most people. So I really like that. But it's that idea of discussing names and things. And even I find that one of the things I do in particular through my sessions is that I don't like any awkward silences and things. So I like the patient to either be speaking, but when it comes particularly to, say, a pelvic health examination, so for anyone else who doesn't know what pelvic health involves, sometimes we do pelvic floor assessments, which are like intimidating, invasive examinations. They're not sore or anything, they're just embarrassing. And so the last thing you want is to be having a pelvic floor examination and there to be silence, because it just creates, like, people worry, because people are like, she's not saying anything, there must be something wrong, they've never seen anything like this in the world, I'm the only person. Like, there's just, it's all these narratives that play. And it's funny, I've seen it the same, like, if anyone's been to a health appointment clinic in any form or capacity, when you're the patient, it doesn't matter if you're a therapist or what qualifications you have, it's the same, you're still in that patient vulnerable position that you think the same thing. And so I've realized, actually, people feel so much more at ease if I nearly narrate as I'm assessing. I'm like, oh, I'm just having a look here, skin all looks really good, everything's looking normal, and you can just see them nearly being like, oh, thank goodness. Do you know what I mean? So that helped.
100%. Yeah, and it's interesting when you said that, which I've only, again, it's interesting. 2 things I want to pull up on is that, and it's a huge topic. It's why I set this podcast around, because you went, I just do that anyway, like passively, like oh yeah, shit, that's the shit I do. But you wouldn't stand up in front of a, you know what I mean, slide lecture, be sound, have a bit of crack with your patients, be nosy about the kids' names. Research does not show that this is the thing, but it does show that empathy and relationship building. But it doesn't say it like that. We just take it for granted that that's what we do, and that's probably why you're good at your job. But it's funny you say passively, because you kind of go, how do you even? I always ask, how do you even interview for that? How do you find a therapist? If you've got a private practice, you're trying to find a therapist that's good at that. who he basically just kind of goes, I'm just kind of, that's what I do with people. And if people observe them, they just be really good, but they wouldn't probably know that they are. They're just being themselves or whatever. Do you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And it's funny because like that, a lot of times that's what I get. Nearly like if people told, they're like, oh, Phil, I'm so glad it came today. You know, I've been putting off having an assessment for whatever symptoms they have for so long, and I just wish I'd come. They're like, you're so easy to talk to, you're so approachable, and you can see, and that's to them. I can see how much weight is put in that in terms of what their apprehensions and worries were before coming. And it is that type of thing because maybe people they're maybe comparing it to experiences where they've either been to some sort of health related appointment and they didn't feel they either got listened to, or that they didn't feel that they could open up and talk about what was really worrying them, or the fact that maybe they just didn't feel seen in other appointments. And I sometimes think about that because I'm, gosh, wouldn't have really, you know, it probably is things that you take for granted, or I was like, or have I just developed that through my years of practice? Is it something that I've just refined? But I think people navigate to certain areas of practice if they do have, like you talked about the pelvic health physios that you worked with in London being deadly crack, and like, I'm not saying I'm deadly crack, but like, I'm just saying that I think that people navigate to the type of work that they're good. Like, I don't think you go into pelvic health unless you feel that you're someone who's really open to talking about this sort of stuff and that you can put people at ease. I think if you thought that you were awkward with conversations, you'd probably sidestep that profession, I would like to think. So I think you're drawn to what maybe you're good at.
I think it's a really good question, and I think it's an interesting one. I think it's a very nice way of maybe looking at it, is to be honest, because I've seen great therapists. I've seen very smart ones, but not great ones.
I do know.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you
mean.
So
like really intelligent. And then you get the ones who know they're really smart and they're just like, I'm just not a therapist. And they go into academia early.
Yep.
You know, they're just like, this isn't for me. And they know that early, you know. Then there's people that sit on the fence. And then, but it's interesting. Like, I don't know if there's like we talked about this again with other guests, like self-awareness. Like, I think again it was Ben. He just kind of went like, he says, "I'm not the lord of communication. I'm just really interested in it, and by no means do I think I'm brilliant at it, because it's such an intangible kind of thing to say you're good or bad at it or whatever. But it's just that when you become conscious of it, you start to realize how people are often quite crap at it.
Yeah, no,
and that you know, all around us. Even like I'm even quite, you know, I like, you know, even in supermarkets, and you know, you were saying about people watching. I'm always a bit like, kind of like, wonder what kind of a day she's had today. You know what I mean? She is just fucking, you know, not interested in it. And like, I could be there with earphones on, so I'm like, oh shit, I forgot I've got earphones in. But she's like, or he's like, or whatever, and he's just like going, I wonder what's going on in their world. Like, she just looks like she does not want to be here, or whatever it might be. A supermarket's always used, but you name it, doesn't matter what it is. Even in I speak to people on the phone, you know, and they start speaking, I'm like, wow, what's going on there? Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, so I think you have to have this interest. And I think there's loads of smart, you know, famous people or smart quotes going like, you know, so, you know, the smarter you are, the less you know, that kind of thing. You know, the more you know, the less you know. And I think the more the ignorant are the ones who don't, you know, they think they're top of the world, you know. And I think that might be the case in what we're talking here. That I think, some therapists will not migrate and they will be good at it. But I think there's probably a lot just maybe going, you know, I think I'm good at it, but they don't self-reflect.
There's that, and there's also an element that, and I see more and more of it, and I've got particularly interested in the topic of neurodiversity. I think there's a lot more being understood about it, but I think there's a lot of people who you can see now, I think we're all on the continuum of neurodiversity to some degree, but you definitely meet people out in the supermarket, someone you're like, oh yeah, strong vibe.
Yeah, but it's useful, isn't it?
So
it is
useful.
I think so. I think you nailed it. Like, because like, even like, it's everywhere, and it's because we are all on spectrums of things, and we've just now kind of going, you know, when we would have met people, we would have went, that's a bit odd, or it's just different. Yeah, whether you want to call it odd or weird or whatever, but sometimes that weird or odd is brilliant crack.
Oh, look at
in the right place. You're like, I want to be with that person. They're amazing, but like, put them in an organization where they have to do stuff like that in order. It's like a disaster. You just don't want them there. You know?
Or it's just put them in a situation. People, like, there's so many people I know who have definitely strong neurodiversity. My brother's one of them, and he'll openly say it. But like, the funniest stories through our lifestyle, like our growing up and everything, just totally inappropriate communication or lack of communication, and it's so funny how you can see someone change from a surrounding where they're comfortable and they're themselves and they can communicate no problem, to take a crowded room or people who they don't know, or there's an unfamiliar environment, and totally just totally changes the dynamics of everything. But I see it everywhere now, and I suppose it probably changes how I communicate with people then, because I try to then adapt. I'm like, oh right, okay, I don't think this person's meaning to be rude or seem disinterested. I think actually I'm not communicating with them in a meaningful way that they understand. Let me see what I can do. And it's fun sometimes if you can just channel that and get on the similar wave, it opens it up. It's unbelievable. Like I get so interested in it because I can see how communication can go one of two ways.
And I call that, like, I would label that like emotional hijacking of the therapist. When you're in there and you can feel yourself going, I don't like this person. You know what I mean? Like just like anywhere, you're just like going, oh my God. And I've got an hour and a half, or the initial few minutes. And in the past, would definitely get hijacked by that. And it would nearly either speed up the assessment or just even your empathy, or all those things would get affected. And if people say they don't get affected by that, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And I put it on my course and say, look, we think we're really good people and we try to be, but unfortunately there's unconscious things that happen. And even down to smell, what people look like, they dress, all of that affects how we then interact with them.
Completely.
And if you put your head in the sand, there's loads of stuff out there to say that. And I get that hijacking now, but you're dead right. Especially those really, it's a bit like you used to get with Parkinson's patients. I don't know if when you used to deal with them, I would struggle to start with, but it helped me. It was nearly like, because I was like going, it's just the condition, but they're actually good crack. But they just, the way they were, I was like, oh God, you really, that's really tough to deal with, the way you're talking to me. And I had one recently in outpatients, and he was great crack. His face was just saying the opposite. And I was just laughing to myself going, this is mad. And the first appointment, he was so kind of a certain way, but when he came back, he was nearly a different person. Same, but different. But I was like prepared for him this time. And it made this conversation better. And I can't put my finger on it, but we just got on better the second time around. The first time was fine. I just was like, wow, this is so difficult. He was so dismissive, but at the same time, quite sound. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So that hijacking, I think, happens to lots of therapists. And I think if we can become aware of it, I don't know what you think as well, or if you support staff and stuff, I think it's such a massive component, because if that's been triggered, you're kind of screwed, really, aren't you?
Yeah, it's funny because I also see, like, and it's possibly I would label it nearly as compassion fatigue too. Like, where like my first few patients, as a result of that, I've changed the way I work, like in sense that like I cap my clinic. I only see a certain number in a row, because I know that I'm not as good of a therapist come that afternoon session, because I'm nearly, because I am listening to people and I am interested and I definitely am focused, it definitely, you reach a threshold for it where you just can't take on anymore, if you know what I mean. So I know, and maybe your empathy levels do probably start to alter a little bit. So I've had to cap my clinic in terms of how many I see in a row, and that's really helped. But I knew that was something, and it's funny because when you start to do stuff like this, you could be like, gosh, like why am I feeling like I need to do this? Am I feeling at my job, or other people better than me? When I was in the hospital, jeepers, you could have seen 20 patients a day. Do you know what I mean? You're just one after the other. But it's a different context, and I definitely work in a different way. And it's that element building into what you've already said of the more you know, the less you know too. Like, I'm on a constant learning journey, and I'm expanding, my understanding of things, and then realizing I know less and less and less and less. And with that there's just, I practice differently, and that's the way I've just had to adapt things. But I am quite content with doing that. Do you work long day shifts?
Yeah, well, yeah. So like I do half and half. So I do NHS 3 days, which is like 8 till 6. But it's broken up a bit in the NHS for me, which is it's different. And some of the appointments are kind of different. Some are assessment clinics, some are kind of rehab. I might have a meeting in here. But in private practice, like tomorrow, I'm in here from 7:30 till 6.
Oh, that's
and
a
I have
long
an hour break.
God.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not good.
Oh.
But you see, the problem is yeah, you know, you gotta have a counselling session. We up for that.
I
But it's kind of like a lot of my appointments are long as well. But yeah, it is like I pick up on the thing about so there's a great book by Kelly McGonigal called The Science of Compassion. She talks in detail about empathic distress. Well, you talked, and there's loads of stuff on that. Sleep as well. If you don't sleep too well, or if you got young kids, like when my kids were younger, oh my God, like there's a good study on it where your indirect and direct empathy signals are massively reduced when you just don't care. It's like, you know what I mean? And
survival mode.
No surprise. You're in survival mode. Yeah. You're probably thinking you're doing your best, and you probably are. But as you said, it's, you know, if you had a gauge, you probably wouldn't be the best you would be. And you know that, don't you? You could just feel that, just kind of like, I could go here, but I'm just too wrecked and I can't. So and the patient probably won't know and thinks it was a great session, but you know that it's like, maybe I haven't given everything here. And it's interesting. What did you make? Yeah, there was another study or a physio at work, and I work, as I say, in the NHS as well. And she came out with a whole thing about like, even what other people put pressures on us. It's moral distress. So that's the other thing, is like, it was empathic and then there's moral. So like, a patient came up late and she was already late, and then the patient was late, and the secretary rang her up and kind of said, oh, will you see this lovely gentleman? He was somewhere else in the hospital. And she's like, I'm already way behind. I'm going to be here till after 7:30. I've got a kid to pick up. I should be finishing at 6, and said, I can't see him. And the secretary was like, you know, classically was trying to like, look, I'm going to have to deal with probably an annoyed person in a minute. So can you please fit them in? And you're like, she's like, I can't fit somebody into a time when I don't have it. And she did this whole presentation on moral distress. And she's like, it's everywhere actually. And it actually affects females more than males. Not that it doesn't affect males, but it's quite an interesting thing that you get an empathic distress, moral distress from all angles. And it's going to affect what we're talking about, which is our communication, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And funny, I totally relate to that idea of even like expectations of others. And definitely when I look back, if I was to reflect, complete people pleaser by trait, in the sense that don't want to let people down. And if I can go above and beyond for anyone, I will. Yeah, I'll squeeze that person in. Do you know what I mean? Like that sort of thing. And I've got better over the years at saying no. No, I just, I've had to be like, it's okay for me to, and kind of like that idea of me, there's a couple of crossroads in my life where I've had to do it actually, because initially when it came to me leaving the NHS, people can't believe, like when I decided I was thinking of leaving, people were like, oh God, you wouldn't leave that job. Like you wouldn't leave it, to the point that you kind of step back and you're kind of like, am I having a midlife crisis? Maybe I wouldn't leave this job. You know what I mean? Like, am I not seeing it clearly here, what they're seeing? And I'm like, hold on a wee minute. Am I going to lose that job? Then I decide I want it back and I can't get that in my local hospital where I want to go. So I remember thinking, gosh. And then I had to go, no, that's what their thoughts are. That's what they would do that's them. And I don't need to take that projection onto me. This is where I'm at. This is what I want to do. And I had to get comfortable with backing that.
Who helped you? My
husband, definitely, which again could be hard, because I'm trying to think, yeah, he was self-employed at that stage. So interesting one. My husband, I was going to say, was formerly a physio. We had started the private practice together, but he had a career change, which was really, really interesting. And again, potentially, I'm trying to think, could it come down to, like, I'm trying to think, is it any relation to communication and things? But like, I can understand. I remember when he initially said that he was thinking of doing a career change, I was like, is this actually a midlife crisis? Like, you know what I mean? But no, but like, I was like, with mortgage, and like you've done loads of extra training, and like, you're really experienced at what you do, and it's, it's a bit like, and then I was like, the grass isn't always greener. Like, what do you want to do? And he then was like, oh, I thought he was going to say something health related or physio related to some realm, and he was like, they go on do like computer programming and data engineering. And I was like, what? Like, what? I was like, I don't think you know anything about those jobs. So he went and he did, fair enough, alongside working, he went and did a master's, because I was like, you need to know that you want to do it. So he did the master's alongside working.
Wow.
And really enjoyed it. And it's funny because like I've known him my whole physio journey, if you know what I mean. So like, and we've always been physios. We've both worked in the NHS, then he went into private, and then I went into private. Physio was a lot of our world in a way. That I thought yeah, well, he probably did enjoy it at the time, but like I was seeing a different side of enjoyment where like he was sitting and we were having a conversation like you and I are now, but I'd see the vaguenesses now. I'm like, he's not listening to me, right? Right, okay. Like, and then he'd be like,
That's just husband wife.
I know, normal. But I'd see this and I'd see the vagueness, right? And then he'd be like, yeah, we'd be making a few verbals, yeah. He wasn't listening, and he'd go, hold that thought, and he'd be way up, and he'd come down and be like, yes, got it. Sorry, I was just thinking about a bit of code I couldn't crack, and I was like, okay, don't know whether to be mad or impressed. But I was like, he actually really enjoys that. And when I look back, I never seen him like. I love the area I work in. I always taking on, like you said, I'm taking on the next thing. Always doing a lot of stuff. I never really seen him want to do like actually want it and be interested in doing stuff outside of work hours, or you know what I mean, like to better himself or whatever. But I started to see him do it in this new career pathway that he wanted to go down. I was like, interesting. But we spoke about it, what the difference nearly was, and he was like, particularly probably came his realization of wanting to change career probably came when we started to have the clinic together, because he was MSK sports, long days, seeing patients back to back, usually in pain. And he was like, I'm not getting enough job satisfaction. He's like, yeah, you can work really hard. You can earn decently as a physio and work really hard in private practice, but you work for it. And he was like, even the patients you don't get better, ring up and be like, could you tell your wife, thank you very much for referring me on? He's like, you get people thanking you, even though you didn't know what was wrong with them. And you didn't know what to do with them. It's like, and you're further, nobody goes, he goes, I'm treating people and maybe they haven't, whether it's a rotator cuff injury, frozen shoulder, whatever, and they have had this issue for a long time. You finally start getting them moving, giving them education, self-help sort of tools. It's like they start to get better. And the next thing they cancel and they're like, oh, it just got better. Or I got the cure last week. Like he goes, I don't get the job satisfaction you get. And I was like, that makes sense. I don't think I could work if I wasn't getting I do like the job satisfaction I get. That's a huge part of it.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's funny, isn't it? Because I'll also I'm in it for that. I'm addicted to being good at my job.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't sound, that's not being arrogant. It's more like if someone, like you said, if someone goes, oh my God, you're the first person that's maybe, and it's not about like, oh, you have a certain condition with your knee.
Yeah.
I don't like, that's grand. I don't really go after that. I'm way after when they're going to go, you just changed how I thought about things or made things possible in my life. I don't really care that I diagnosed, or if you caught something early, like you got imaging and it was early, so they saved their life nearly in some ways. That doesn't even, that's a really, I had that the other day. This woman she had an infection and then she had a heart attack, and if she hadn't been seen for the infection, she would have died. Basically. It's that kind of like, it's really like doctors would be all over that. You know what I mean? They'd be loving it. But I was like, yeah, like I'm glad you didn't die. I'm glad you didn't have a heart attack. But I'm more interested in now getting you back doing what you want to do with your grandkids, and you come and going, oh, I can't believe I could do that. And they said I wouldn't be able to do this, and now I can. That is what I'm after. And I think that's kind of, if you don't have that, I'd struggle to know. And if someone's listening, it's like going, I don't know if I've always had that, but I've always been interested in people. So I think there's maybe a little crossover there when I'm thinking it out loud in my head. It's kind of like I'm interested in people, and then therefore, because I'm interested in that, I like this side of therapy. And yes, there's physical stuff like exercise and assessment that I've trained to do and understand. That bit is kind of nearly like, yeah, I kind of like all the other social bit of it.
Oh, I know. I completely resonate with that. And it's interesting because now when I look at Patrick, he's quite happy to have left that. Now, I would say he was good at socialising. He was really good at reasoning with patients. So I never flagged that would have been even, and I never flagged the fact that I never, I suppose, really thought about the fact that people weren't attributing, like, thank you very much for, as you say, changing the course of my rehab, or changing how I think about it, or get me back to the sport I wanted to do, rather than what I read on the internet that said I was never to do that again. And it's those things that really resonate with me. Like, particularly, again, I come back to sexual dysfunction, but I find that there's some conditions that, from a societal and from what people think about these conditions perspective, could change the trajectory of their life in a way, which sounds a bit dramatic.
Yeah.
But like, I've had really young girls who have had vaginismus, which is a painful pelvic floor disorder,
Yeah.
from a really young age,
Yeah.
have never been able to be sexually active, have created a huge taboo in their head. They actually, even how they map out what's happening down below, they think that this abnormal vagina that's either blocked or angles or does funny things. And a lot of what my job isn't doing, I'm not doing anything to actually fix their pelvic floor. I'm just helping them understand that everything's absolutely normal, and this is what you can do to influence how those muscles behave. And you can then change someone from deciding that they're never going to even try dating because of this abnormal condition or something, to suddenly, like, I've had patients who the odd time I'll just get a message to go, oh, I just want to send you a picture. This is my boyfriend. I've been going with him for a year now. And that's all it's said in a message. I'm like, that's brilliant. That's wonderful. And that's, I'm like, right, they're dating, they're happy out, good. And you're like, God, that's so amazing, because like, that person could have really regressed, cut themselves off from friends and social circles because they weren't keeping up with what everyone at a young age is going out, socializing, doing. It's a really weird thing. And that's why I think we need forms of communication, so that people can either access information to know that these conditions exist and there's something that can be done about them, and to openly talk to someone who can guide them, coach them, inform them, help them. And I think that's a huge aspect of what we do within physiotherapy, but also wider health and fitness professionals who might be listening will have elements of this too, where it's resonating.
Yeah, the more and more, like, everything you're saying is, you just talked about a condition that's completely, I wouldn't say 100%, but once you've done your physical, after that, once you kind of, like, which is probably, I would say, straightforward enough from your point of view. It's not like a complicated pathological problem in the physical sense. So it's 100% a communication situation. And you're just thinking about, like, just even people listening about, maybe, they're struggling with the, even the research or understanding research, because that can be difficult. It's not everyone's cup of tea either. They do like this component, and it's like going, well, it's such a huge component what we do, and it's probably more important than anything. And you can always learn the other stuff. Do you know what I mean? You can always get that bit. But it's interesting, if you're interested in people and you work on your communication, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? To not only just that kind of, well, it's the outcome, which makes you feel good, but also your enjoyment of the job. Because, like, I'm enjoying chatting to you now, which is like on a 8:30 on a whatever night. You know what I mean? I don't come in here and be like, oh my God, I'm going to have to chat to somebody. It's really annoying. I'm actually like, oh, this is going to be fun. But you can do that with patients, because I know so many physios, and they're just a bit like, because, the patient, it's like, it's a big deep breath in. And I think it's because it's that difficulty in that communication. It's not just assessing people, what when you mentioned that, obviously, which is going to be really important, is like conversations with teenage, like, it doesn't matter whether it's because I know you say males and females, just to really point that out as well. So I would flip either side, because typically questions male on female seem to always have the kind of bias of being more difficult. Like, you could argue either way, but I suppose I'm biased because me asking a young girl about menstrual cycles, which I'm very confident now. I've been pretty good with that. Having a daughter probably helped as well. But how do you come across people who struggle with, or what should we be doing in that space, especially when we've got, like, young girls coming in? Is there anything that you think questions are important, or ways you can break down, say, that age group when it comes to sexual dysfunction or even pelvic health problems?
Yeah, like, what age are you talking about?
Maturity, 12, 13
Yeah.
to 18, that kind of awkward-ish age, so just asking questions. How do you approach that? Parents might be in the room, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And I do see, actually, teens and things, and they always do have their parents come in. And it's getting that balance of I think that it's really important that people, I like to talk in an anatomical approach because I think we should know what anatomical terms are and not fluff around it or try to come up with like coded names. It's really interesting
Yeah.
actually because talking from a communication aspect, there's actually, when we look at children and like sexual abuse and things, a lot of times children have been trying to communicate with someone, an adult, a trusted adult in person, to tell them, but because a lot of parents, and it really opened my eyes when I was talking to an expert about this, because as a parent myself, like what we call the anatomy down there with our kids and things affects their ability to communicate to someone. So somebody must have been saying, "Oh, my uncle likes to see my flower," or my something, you know, and was telling a teacher this, or it was something that sounded really. I was like, "That's nice," you know. And it went on for a while until they realised this child is communicating the only way she knows because that's the terminology that's being used. Alarming. So I always think talk about, and I think we need to educate young girls about the fact that they have both a vulva and a vagina, and that, you know, anatomy and terms and what that involves. And I have 2 boys and 2 girls, and it really interests me because the boys know everything about their anatomy. Jeepers, they're half the time they're holding their anatomy. Do you know what I mean? No, but like, I've got young boys.
I know what you mean. No, yeah, you're right.
Girls,
well, getting giddy. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Girls, basically, like, I've only young kids, but that's how they just do. They just know their anatomy.
Yeah.
Girls don't, and like, I know that there's at some stage, like my eldest is 10, and she's starting to get curious about things. So we're going to have to start talking at some point about even the fact that, like, at the minute, I assume she only thinks that there's a hole to empty your bladder and a hole to empty your bowel, and she doesn't even know that there's extra anatomy down there. And you think it is very hidden for women. And like growing up in Ireland, like when I think about even our education growing up, very scurried over, very not ill-informed. You don't talk about that sort of stuff. You know, we're really disarming women in particular because the guys can look and see what they've got. The girls typically can't. So I think we have to be better at if you're awkward about talking about it, there's lots of resources out there, even just like about teaching teenagers about their body and teaching them about menstruation and sexual function and different things, and curiosity about body awareness and all that. And I think that's really important to break it down. My other thing is signposting people to things like podcasts. I think podcasts are a really, really good medium, and a really good medium within the health sector, because it's easier for people to take up information and to follow information, actually absorb it nearly passively when they're listening to a conversation, rather than someone telling them and educating them that you do this and this is that and then you do this. That goes over their head. They take one wee tiny component of it. So I always like to, when I actually use podcasts as a library of resources. So, and I actually use a communication form. I'm a bit, I don't know whether it's the Irish mommy in me or what, but like when I have my patients then on our first session, when I assess someone, so we've talked about different various ways that we communicate in clinic, but when I send them away, anything that we've discussed, basically of relevance, anything I'm signposting them to, anything that I think is of relevance, I send them an itemized email. It's nearly like their roadmap to recovery, because I want to make people understand their health. They don't need me passively as a therapist. They need to understand what the findings are of today, what they're working on, so that every so often they can go back to that email and go, "Oh, I forgot about that. We did talk about actually using footstool empty bowels. I should do that." Or whatever it is. And then podcasts, I usually have some podcasts that can source somewhere that is reinforcing elements of what we've talked about, like in the session. It might be taking a slightly different slant on it. It might be 2 people discussing it slightly different terms, but it helps bring it together and land. So again, it's a form of communication. It's like me trying to tap into all those forms.
Because we were saying before we came on, you've done podcasts yourself.
Yep.
So what's it called again?
At Your Cervix, the podcast.
At Your Cervix, that was it. Yeah, I need to get a couple of them under my belt then. So because you did it with Emma
Brockwell, yeah.
Yeah, Emma Brockwell, yeah. Sound. And do you do them anymore, or
we haven't done one? We haven't done a season a year. We've been doing seasons, and they've been working really, really well. And then work, like all the different commitments we've had, and I'd say we'll take it up again because I have people asking for it. I have people asking when it's coming again. You know, like there was definitely people, and funny, we put it out for health and fitness professionals, and that's how we pitched it, even in terms of the language and the discussions we were putting out. But patients were then coming and telling me they'd listened to it and that they found this really useful, or they came to a session because they heard a podcast and then realized this was, and I was like, huh. And I was like, okay, so maybe it doesn't matter that there's some stuff there that might go over their head. Maybe they're getting enough out of it and they're following the flow, or it's given them the terminology that now they want to Google, you know, a bit more informed. So I find it, so I use it as a library of resources for my patients basically. And because it's a lot of the sessions I send are from At Your Cervix, they're from other podcasts as well. But I know the guests that have been on, I know the credibility, you know what I mean? Because you want to give people good evidence-based information.
Good.
Yeah.
But that, and we need to, I think that's the other thing. I don't know whether it comes from, you know, when we were in university or where it comes from, but it's definitely a snobbery, which this is why I kind of like podcasts as well, because it kind of breaks down the fact that, you know, patients come in and think we're like medical and very stuffy and a little bit like, you know, some of them even kind of go, God, yeah, you know, it's such a different approach you had. It was way more relaxed. It was like, because that's what I want to create. Because that's my style. That's what I want to do. Like, it's not for everyone potentially, but I want to create that because I don't like stuffiness. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to give patients way more credit for their knowledge as well. Like, I get people in here and I'm like, fucking hell, they have researched that hip condition to the nth degree, data, surgeons, treatments. You know, they've not got anywhere and that's my job to unlock it, which is what I've, you know, what I like doing. But they'll listen to stuff like that. They listen to way more medical podcasts. There's so many out there now. It's just the way we need to get away from the fact that people can't listen and just not understand everything and still have it. Like, I can listen to stuff about space. Like, I listen to Stephen Hawking stuff. I love it. And like after it, like I'm like, oh my, what? I can't even comprehend what you're on about. But it's fun and it's great, and I'm interested. And I'll watch another one of something else. You don't have to know everything, and I think it might just break down the public's interpretation of talking about this stuff, so they can hear therapists having a chat and going, actually, it's actually I could go and see it. I didn't know that's what they're about. You know, whether actually people go and listen to these podcasts, but I think if they're out there, and like you said, which I'm going to definitely rob, is go, you know what, you should go and listen to this, and these are just two therapists who really know the stuff, talking about the area, and actually it might be that thing that just says to them, you know what, I'd probably go, and people would travel, you know, that's the thing you were saying about setting up a clinic in Fermanagh in the middle of nowhere, like, but you know, people will travel for that kind of like the right therapist, because it can be quite difficult to find as well, you know.
Absolutely. And that's the thing I found is that, and I had to think about it actually. If I think about myself, if I have a health issue and I want to get something sorted, I will source who I want to go to, and I will go to them. And I won't think, you know, geography won't really come into it, if you know what I mean. I will go to where I want to go because I trust in that person. And it is, people will travel and they'll prioritize. But what I would say typically, and when I talk about even giving people a roadmap to manage their own condition, I mean that in a way, because a lot of patients, I have a lot of people who will come to me for one session to get that one nearly guidance, and maybe they're working with someone else as well. But they just want to get, I think it's nearly what you're talking about, like their plan unlocked as to the direction they need to go, and then the roadmap will give them what they need, and then I might just check in with them via email. Do you know what I mean? And it's just so, and there's people, I remember telling people that that's a lot of the way I work, and they're like, oh my goodness, but like that's not a good business model. And I was like, I know, I'm not really a business person, and that's my downfall, right? I'm not, but on the caveat of that, I've never had to worry about my caseload, because
no, exactly.
Never.
That's what I knew you were going to say that. Yo, you can't. You can, like, because it's the exact same thing. I've always said that as well. It's like on the model of having to retention. So a good friend of mine, Andy Hosgood, who's also been on this. You definitely need to listen to my podcast.
I'm going to. I actually had meant it before this, but it's time. It's time in my life.
Yeah, but he's a brilliant. He's a business coach as well as a therapist, you know. And he's the one who actually got me to set this up. And he said you should do this, and I was like, oh God. And he talks about that as well. That kind of I actually lost my train of thought. What we were saying there. What were you saying
about, like,
before?
Not needing to, like, a bad business model, like
retention. Yeah, talking about retention instead of the old kind of the idea like you have to keep you retain patients, not actually the patients themselves. Sometimes you retain everyone in their circle.
100.
You know what I mean? So they're going out. They tell their friends. So they tell the gyms, like in my world, they might go back to their club or whatever it might be. I don't deal with all sport, but they'll be like, he's the only one. He's got 50-kilogram dumbbells in his clinic. No physio has that in Cornwall. You know what I mean? Or very few do. And it's like
every physio is going to go out and get 50-kilogram dumbbells now.
Yeah, good luck. About 400 quid. Fair play to you. So I hope they do. It's really taken me about 10 years to get a heavier weight than 20 kilos in the NHS department. But anyway, so but it's that, isn't it? It's not about like I've often said, I've had phone calls from patients' family who are down on holiday, and it's that creation. And I'm often saying, it's like, my job is to make you fully independent, so that you really had a great service. And just like anyone else, like when you have someone to come out and fix something in your house and they do a really good job, you're going to likely to call them again. You're going to likely to recommend them. It is simple as that. But so many therapists don't see that model.
No.
And I think it's also linked back into thinking, all right, I need to hold on to them, and there's not enough patients to go around. There's plenty of patients to go around.
There's actually not enough therapists for the amount of patients that there are out there. And it's funny, because I also think that it opened up a level of accessibility to patients who traditionally, like, going private. Not everyone has the means to go private. Like, people should, in an ideal world, people would be able to access all the services they need at a public point. And that's just not the way our systems are. And we know that. And that's unfortunate. But I hate unequal playing fields too. And I suppose that's probably even like that aspect of things coming out to me, where I'm like, there's people who can afford to come private to me, and there's people who can't. So being able to, or like people coming for once and not having any expectation, like, you're not coming back and you're not getting booked in for 6 sessions, you know what I mean? You're coming for an appointment, and I often give people the roadmap and go, look, I'll check in with you in 4 weeks' time. We'll see how things are going. If you're flying, you're probably grand. You always know where I am if you need a review. And I've had people then come to me and go, look, I had a friend and she said, like, I could even just come once because that's all I can afford, and just get a bit of an idea. And nearly like, I'll not be annoying you because I'm only coming to come once. And I'm like, absolutely, I've got a chance to give someone information who wouldn't have otherwise accessed it. And so you can change the course of their journey, even if in an ideal world, I would have loved to have reviewed them again. If that's not, that one session is still really worth it for them, and they always know where I am.
Exactly. And there's some great evidence around perceived social support out there. So even people that have, rather than even received support, perceived that they know that it's there. That has, it's something like improves patient satisfaction, patient outcomes, adherence to the treatment that you've given. Just to know, like I even had a guy who came back today with his knee, and he just was like, he says, but he's got loads better. I feel like a fraud. The classic thing. I feel like a fraud. It came back. He said, but like, I'm so scared that it came back. It was so bad. But then I did my exercise and it got better. And I was like, oh, brilliant. So now you know that you can manage this condition. And he says, I know, but will I have to go back to my GP? Like, he looked terrified, but he was 67. And it was interesting when he said it, he was like going, I'm 67. I'm still climbing up ladders. I cannot stop doing that. I've got friends around me dying and not doing anything. And I'm not. And that was it. It suddenly went to, all right, I could see the fear. So all I just said to him, he said, so, how would I see you again? And I said, listen, pal, you're on a 9-month, 12-month open appointment. You get to see me. If it goes wrong, just call up this number and you can book in a review. There's no issue. There's no problem. And you want to see him, just go. He was like, sat back and he was like, shaking my hand. It was nearly like close to hugging, apart from me 67-year-old man. That kind of way. That's all he needed. It was NHS.
It's a reassurance. So it's that level of even reassurance, and like, as you said,
I'm going to be all right.
Yeah, but it's like that. I love that, because I really think that, like, particularly if I go back to that example of, say, vaginismus patients, that's the type of presentation that people can make. Absolutely big improvements with. They can totally resolve it, but there's always the fear of it coming back. And so, like, it's like any pain condition, when you start to get a niggle of any, even a wee bit of pain, the worry and everything sets in, and sure, that just feeds in. You know what I mean? Like, there's this whole exacerbation.
You nearly need that. You nearly need that kind of thing to happen. You know what I mean? That bump in the road. It's for them to go, like, he had a bump in the road, or that a girl might go, oh my God, it's coming back, shit's going to happen, and all this stuff. But then she does the things that you said, and it's like, oh no, it's got better again.
Completely.
And to do that and knowing that you were there if you needed it is the thing. But if you were not there, then that would escalate, could escalate.
Absolutely.
And then she could be like, you know what I mean? And then that again,
Sorry, I was more just saying, like, it's kind of exactly what you were saying, that like when they leave and they've managed their conditions, I'm like, look at, and if you ever flare up, use that email. Go to it as your first point of contact. Like, go back and go, what have I not been doing or not keeping top of in this? Or maybe I could read, because I was like, that should actually give you, I imagine some of those will solve your problem again. And if it doesn't, then we can figure out what's going on. But you shouldn't need to run to someone as first point of contact. You actually know a lot about this now. Like, you know a lot more than most people know about this condition now. And it's that element of things. But I think that a lot of people, it's the passive models of care that I really can't handle. It's that idea of, oh, you need to come back to me because I'm the only person who can, work this out or tell you what's wrong. And I'm like, oh my goodness, just aren't people with the information.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a huge problem in healthcare. We could do a whole podcast on that itself, really, isn't it? That idea of what are we really trying to do there? What are you trying to achieve? And what's your evidence for that kind of approach? It's a bit of it's a battle for us to try to come against that. There's definitely a lot of people who like that retention model and say, right, well, there's a lot of great therapists who do passive treatments who don't do that. And I've got a lot of colleagues around me who do like a lot of manual therapy stuff, soft tissue stuff, but they're brilliant when they're like, this isn't working for you. You need to go, they'll send them to me, and then I'll be like, no, great. You go back to them. So it's a really symbiotic relationship. They get really some results off that, but there's not that, they don't say that, oh, I'm going to fix you or I'm healing you. This is an approach. This is an approach. We can do this if you're up for this, but we have a network of people who are here for you if you need it. So that's what I would see us as, like, there's no competition. We should all be just like, yeah, we could easily be able to interact. I'd love to be able to know somebody who I can just go, oh, you need to go to them.
Absolutely.
And that's like, I think I even text you. I think I might have messaged you about who in Cornwall should I trust with from a women's health private and stuff like that. Yeah. And you were like, oh yeah, these people are good. That's what you want, isn't it? So you can share that kind of really good quality of health.
Absolutely.
Listen, we're going to finish with last one. Last question. It's probably too big of a question, but I thought, what has, and you can make it short or long, depends on how much time you got, but what has been a parent? What you can do, one thing, two things, or what are the top things that you've learned as a parent, bring it into being a better therapist? Maybe even around communication or anything you like. I don't mind, but what do you think what have you learned from being a parent and making you a better therapist or business owner even?
Parent, first of all, I actually was thinking about this earlier in our conversation, how when we're talking about what makes us better communicators, either understanding communication or being able to communicate so that other people can understand you, being a parent, or for anyone who even has pets or anything like that there, when you have people who cannot speak or speak coherently to tell you what you want, you to figure out what is wrong with them, you definitely start to fine tune and sharpen your senses and you start to problem solve, and you start to really take note much more of the nonverbals or other forms of communication. And that is really important in all areas of health and fitness, I think, but particularly in pelvic health, where someone might be communicating to me with consent to say they want to have an assessment, but if everything else about them says they don't want an assessment, well, I'm flagging that straight away, and we're going to work on that first, because to me, everything to do with pelvic health and like a lot of the pelvic pain conditions, they can be very traumatic for people. They can either be caused by trauma, or they can be very traumatic for people to have to live and persist with because of all the societal and taboo issues around them. So you don't want to be feeding into anything that associates a negative experience with anything to do with pelvic health again, because that's what we're trying to change. So non-verbals are hugely important, and I would say being a parent helped me with that, and having pets helped me with that, because you have a dog or a cat who something's up with them and you're trying to work out what it is. A business owner, yeah, I probably would say being a parent has made me better at multitasking, and committing to things. I'm a lot more decisive, because when I get a window of time to do work or something, I'm at it. So I have to be quick, sharp, and commit. Whereas Gráinne gone by might have pondered over this for a longer time and thought, well, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? No, I'm in, I'm committing, I'm done. So I'm probably more productive, actually, even though my life's a lot more chaotic and busy.
100% agree with that. That's exactly what I would always say. It's like 5 minutes has now become where I would break my life into, right? Especially when they were younger, You know, we had twins.
Oh, wow.
And 302. So you have 4, so you've done me on 1, like, you know, but the 3 at one stage, like, it was fucking chaos. Like, it was a circus. It still
I
is a
still
circus,
feel like
but
my
it's just
life's a circus. Yeah, like I was going to say, yeah, no, mine's a circus.
you know, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you're humming to yourself a song to try and get a child to bed, while the other, and it was like, because we're at the same time, so the other, you know, my missus in the other room, she's like, you know, singing away to this, and I was like, going, if someone came in here now and offered me, like, you know, 10 quid for this baby, I'd be like, you can have it. You can, actually, I'll pay you for this, you know. So it's like, anytime, so you've sleep deprivation and all that, and don't want to make it out to be a big, like, parenting is a horror show, but it one of the things I did is, I don't think I would have set up my private practice. I don't think I would have got into to even the teaching as much. I think it's just, it gives you a laser focus that you kind of like, right, I get jobs done. And I know you're wrecked and it's hard, but I think it's definitely suited my personality. I think if I didn't have children, I'd probably not do as much as I do. Weirdly.
I look back and think,
I just, you know,
what did I do with my time? What did I do? Because I'm just like, my life is so chaotic and busy. And actually, it's actually quite nice. You know, it's always when you talk to other parents that, again, you hit on a level where everyone can understand or relate to the subject that's been talked about, like even the chaos or people up at night or lack of sleep, or you're having to sing and do something, or you're having to rub someone's shoulder or something, you know what I mean? Whatever it is they like. And me and Patrick sometimes listen going, you're like, do you think other houses are as chaotic as this? Or do you think other people are like, do their kids just go to bed and sleep? Or do their kids just go to bed at 7 o'clock and ours are still climbing around at 10, you know, and they're back up, I want a drink. Like, I want a drink, like just to dilly-dally. Yeah. I'm just like, oh my goodness. So it's quite nice because you talk to other people and you're like, oh yeah, okay, everyone's kind of going, navigating the same sort of things, but you don't see it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I'd like to just finish up with. You know, you can improve, and I've said it probably many times on air, is like, it's every aspect of communication, no matter what, like those were hard, sometimes there were dark times, you know, you're absolutely, you know, sick in hospitals we've been in, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, and it is really stressful at times. But out of that comes good stuff that, you know, if you are a therapist listening or a health professional or whatever, and you just think, oh my God, it's like going, there's other things that come out of it. There's always positive things that come out of it. I don't want to be someone like, oh yeah, Mr. Positive Guru, you know, everyone should be happy. Like, he's like, without doubt, I am miserable a lot. But, you know, but then I look at it kind of going, if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't have done that.
Oh,
I don't feel that, you know what I mean? It is a class. And the thing with kids is you have no choice. Like I've always said to like people like going, if the SAS or some kind of like, you know, elite military want to train, you know, these killers basically, I said, come round my gaff, right, for a weekend. But the only problem is they'd probably murder my children within 5 seconds. So they have to be some sort of change in their brain so they actually love my child, but they won't last the weekend. I can guarantee you they won't last the weekend because it's so hard. Like, you know what I mean? But because it's there, you have to problem solve.
Oh, completely.
And that's what I was thinking about your business. Like, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's a bit like, right, oh my God, that's broken or that's thing. And I had to do up my clinic and it was like in here scraping walls at 2 a.m. And I was like going, I wouldn't have done this. I would have been gone home. But I was like, oh no, I need to have that done because if I can't get that done in 2 weeks, this will happen. It's funny, isn't it? It's just, it focuses you and stuff like that, you know?
It is the problem. It's the strategies and things that you come in. But it's funny because when you were talking about the chaos and training the SAS, I was thinking, this is a happy time. This isn't like a chaos as in kids being bad or fighting. And I've boys and girls and they all wrestle and they're best of friends, but they kill each other at the same time. Yeah. So I'm constantly refereeing. But I decided, you might know, Cavan has a skate park now, which is great. So I realized at the play park there's an actual skate park, and I was like, that's pretty cool to have near me, because like in England, different places, you might have loads of those. You don't really get those that much around Ireland, Northern Ireland. So I was like, deadly. Kids, do you want to go to the skate park? Of course, they're like, yeah. Now, we hadn't been to the skate park before, and I didn't really do the pre-risk assessment of this. My kids are a bit wild, and they're definitely adventurous, and they're not scared to try stuff. So I decided I would take my 4 and we'd meet with the 3 cousins. Well, I just remember standing in the skate park and there was kids trying skateboards on the actual half pipes all at the same time. Someone rolled, and I was like, everybody needs to stop moving. I cannot cope at the minute. There's going to be broken bones. And I just remember thinking, life is chaotic. Like at that point, I was like, I'm not made for this today. I am not made for manning 7 kids on a skate park. How did I get here? And it was my idea.
That's brilliant. Let's go back to your was it let's get this party started. Isn't that at the beginning? That was your song.
That's my song. Yeah. Very good.
Brilliant, Grog. I could talk to you all night. Brilliant crack. And I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully people definitely would have taken some great stuff. So
thanks for having me. It's been great.
Nice one.
Thanks for listening to Teacup. If you liked it, tell all your friends. If you didn't, well, maybe you'll like the next one. Go to procareeducation.com or Procare Education on Instagram for more information on courses and the Bamboo Project. And remember, always be sound and not a dickhead.